God bless Decipher, the rotation. God bless the beatboxer's lungs, amen for breath control, the smiles that cry open faces when flow goes unbroken, and the smoke. To stories you can see, to coming in on the one. Some ideas, they shake you out of your sleep like when a toddler creeps. Totality of the deep, the mere thought of an unconscious manifestation carried out with the beat. Positive charged protons creating neural explosions. Time hiccups when fingers and pads touch. Dead air smiles because it knows what's coming. The countenance of the clock claps hands. The choreography of the knock slaps jams. And you be like, who made this? Vertebrae responding to the call so bad to make a B-girl curve the wall. Picture this. Underneath the margins, your words can breathe. Got your listeners tilting isosceles the way you holding volcanic quills, spitting decrees. Better believe with flows like these, you got gills. Screaming at daffodils or dreaming in mandrills, derivative of skills. You're built in the workshop, rocking with Ra. Cause in life, the woodshed don't stop. It don't stop. It don't stop. Don't stop.
What's going on, family? It's yours truly, Mazi Mutafla, Executive Director of Words, Beats, and Life. This is day 5 of this week, number 2 of the Alternative Winter Break Media Arts Edition. And I'm super excited to be here. It's so funny. I've actually been talking this brother up on every panel I've ever been on, every conference I've ever been to, because people always ask me, like, what was the motivation to start Words, Beats, and Life? And I always give credit to 2 people. One is my mentor, brother by the name of Saphir Rob. And the second is this brother right here, Mr. Dominic Painter.
How's it going?
What's going on, Dom?
Big shout out to Saphir.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you first off for joining us. You're coming to us live from Los Angeles, California. And I didn't actually, so the reason for folks that don't necessarily know our story, the reason why you were an inspiration is because at the second year we hosted the Words, Beats, and Life conference at the University of Maryland, we had a career fair. And you were there with an organization called the Midnight Forum, and you were like, it's a hip hop nonprofit. I was like, what on earth is a hip hop nonprofit? And you broke down the science for me. And when I graduated later that year, I actually decided to create a hip hop nonprofit myself. And so the collaborations began there, but didn't stop.
Nah, went on to do radio together, mural programs. It's a lot of history here.
Yeah, man, you was busy. Well, I'm especially excited to have you here for a couple reasons. One, because you're probably one of my favorite DJs, one of my favorite folks pushing the envelope around creativity with the streaming that you're doing right now. But I've always wondered, much like most of the folks I've been talking to this week and last week, about kind of your personal story. So often when we have conversations like this, it's more about the work, like talking about the things that we did, but not necessarily who we are. And I feel like because you've done the work, it's important that people know what some of your early influences and inspirations were, some of your family members, etc. So why don't we start with the question I've asked everybody, which is, how much of your family history do you know? Like, how far back does your knowledge of your family go?
It's funny because you had brought this up as sort of like a pre-interview question to give me the heads up. And I was tempted to call my mother just to get some extra information. But I was like, you know what? I'm not going to force anything that wasn't already there. And the truth of it is I don't really have a lot of history knowledge about my family. My father is British. My mother's American, African-American. And I know next to nothing about my father's family, aside from where he's from and that he has a brother that has a son. I don't know them. I don't know anything about my grandparents other than my grandmother on my mother's side. I know her entire family for the most part. And I can go back maybe to great grandparents on my mother's side, my grandmother's side. That's it.
And so can you share what about knowledge about your parents?
Well, my great grandparents on my grandmother's side, going back a few generations at least, poor working class out of Austin, Texas. That side of the family essentially stayed in Austin to this day. Almost nobody left. My grandmother eventually went to college, became a chemistry teacher, got married to my grandfather, who was based out of Buffalo, before moving with my grandmother to Tennessee in Nashville, which is where I always knew her to live until her passing a few years back. And then that's kind of started my whole family moving away from Austin, where at that point, my mother went east, my uncle went west, ended up in Portland. My mother went to, oh man, I'm going blank, Ohio. It's an Ohio college near where Dave Chappelle lives, Antioch, before going to Bloomington to get her next degree, which is where she met my father. My father was a professor in Bloomington. He comes from England, as I mentioned before, a small country town in the mid-country called, I used to call it Dudley until I got older, and people from the UK would be like, "Oh, you mean Dudley? Dudley." So my family's from Dudley, sort of considered black country, very, very kind of lower to middle class, working class people. And my father decided he wanted to kind of break from that and become more collegiate, and went into working for universities for the rest of his life. And like I said, my parents met in Bloomington, Indiana. My brother ended up getting his master's at Bloomington. So I was the only person that doesn't have a connection to Bloomington, because I went to University of Maryland, where I met this guy, Mozzie. But my mother went on to be an economist, kind of breaking a lot of ground and ceilings by being a black female economist in corporate America, eventually working for Mobil Oil, and where she met my stepdad, who was one of the first black lobbyists on Capitol Hill.
Wow. The thing that amazes me most about these conversations is, like, that's such a simple question, and I've known you for more than 20 years and I've never asked. I feel like such a terrible friend, but I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to share it. I wonder, so where did you go? Where'd you go to school? Elementary school.
All right. So I moved a lot. A lot of people, when I tell them where all the places I've lived, think I'm a military brat, but it's just my parents got different jobs and moved around. And then they separated and moved around some more. And but I was born in Boston, then Toronto, spent a lot of time in Nashville with my grandmother.
You were born twice?
Ended up doing most of my elementary school in St. Louis at Ralph M. Captain Elementary School, where I was introduced to racism. I didn't know it at the time, but in retrospect, that was a horrible place.
And so, talk to me about your earliest memory. As you're a multi-dimensional creative, as a DJ, as a graphic artist, as a podcaster, as a radio personality. I wonder, tell me a little bit about the first memory you have of doing something creative, whether that's in a school, home, or community environment. Your earliest memory of doing something creative.
Like a lot of kids, I don't know about you, Mozzie. Did you have to learn recorder in elementary school?
I lived in Germany until. You
were in Germany?
Yeah, I wasn't
accordion. Were they?
No, I was one of the that you were talking about.
I think a lot of kids in the United States were forced to have the recorder as their introductory instrument. It's a woodwind instrument that's long, but it's very small and simple. So you have the flute holes, but you, instead of doing sideways, you blow into it like a woodwind. And that's sort of what they launch our musical trajectory off of. And the funny thing is, my father wasn't the most creative person. He was a scientist. He was very intellectual, but he loved playing recorder, and he had all these different sized recorders, and he thought it was awesome that that's what they made us play in the United States. But for United kids in the States, it's kind of corny. But that led to me playing saxophone for a brief period, which leads into another racism story at my school. Then I stopped playing saxophone. I eventually became like more of a rhythm section guy, playing bass and drums. But recorder, I would say that's the first time I can really recall, aside from drawing, of course, that I was really being instrumental and musical and creative.
What grade was that you started playing the recorder?
Somewhere like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, somewhere in that realm.
I'm curious because I didn't have this experience. How long did you play it? Like how many years?
They just make you play for 1 year, as like when you start doing music class. You know, it's like in elementary school, you have you have gym, you have music, you have just your basic science, you know, and that's what first year of music, that's what we did before they allowed us to pick something of our own.
So I got to say, you're the first person that I've asked who, when they talked about the earliest memory, it was with an instrument that their parent actually played. So I wonder, how did your father encourage you other than having his own recorders? Do you remember?
My father actually wanted me to get into piano. And in retrospect, I wish I'd listened. There's a few things he encouraged me to do, and I didn't do it. One was play piano. And as someone that got more into music production later in life, piano would have been hella valuable. And I didn't do it. The other thing was he felt like I was always a great storyteller and I should go into acting because I was so demonstrative when I told stories. And I just never got into acting. Now I live in LA and everybody's like, you don't go on any auditions just for the hell of it? And I'm like, man, that's just too much to juggle. But I always think about it. I'm like, maybe that's something I should have done. I should have gone into, you know, theater in school or something, but I didn't do it. But yeah, he wanted me to do anything he was interested in, like most parents. So he's British, which meant did not like basketball. He wanted me to play soccer. You know, he played recorder, so he was all about that. He thought it was awesome.
And so you started with the recording. You talked about moving to the saxophone. What grade was that?
That was the following year. And again, I can't remember the exact year.
In the 3rd grade?
4th, maybe.
Wow. Let me find out you were Lisa Simpson when you were a kid.
I was. Man. Yeah.
And so
that's when I met Bleeding Gum Murphy.
So you have this immersive educational experience in the 3rd and 4th grade with the recording and the saxophone. Do you play more instruments in elementary school, or does your next major? Go ahead. I
mean, I played saxophone a few, like maybe 6 months at the most, and it was this weird situation. I went to basically an all-white school in the Midwest. If you know anything about St. Louis, you know it's crazy segregated and racist. On top of that, if you don't know anything about St. Louis, all you need to know is about Ferguson and Michael Brown. And if anybody grew up there or used to live there, they saw that go down and went, that's about right. And and essentially I had situations where my teachers lied on me in numerous occasions or bestowed some higher form of criticism on me than they would any of the other students in the class. And you see how pale I am. It's messed up, but I ain't, you know, to any mixed kid out there, you know that no matter your shade, society looks at you as not white. Might not know what the fuck you are, but you're not white. So getting back to music class, I love playing saxophone. I had my sax with me every class. That was the one thing I looked forward to in school every day. And one day I get called, I get kicked out of music class. And my parents are called to school and they're told it's because I'm never prepared and I never bring my instrument with me. So this is something I'm like scratching my head about. And of course, as a kid, your parents are probably going to take your teacher's word over yours. But I was prepared and excited every time. And when I got kicked out of that class and put into something else based on this lie that my teacher said, I gave up saxophone. I sent it back. I didn't play instruments again for maybe 3 years. I gave up.
Wow. I'm mad that, personal point of privilege. I usually have this little fake me out haiku where I say, my puritanical second grade English teacher stole my magic. I don't know how to spell. So like you literally had a teacher steal your music from you and your love of a particular instrument. That's some next level trauma. I wonder when do you feel like, what is the next step in your evolution as a creative? When do you remember getting excited about something creative again? Is it middle school or is it later in elementary?
Junior high, I moved to New York, and that's when this was like 88. This is at the height of what was originally called the golden age of hip hop. And so I'm talking about Slick Rick, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, Public Enemy, Salt and Pepper, the whole nine. And that got me so invested in wanting to do anything that was music. And I would say Jam Master Jay sparked that fire to want to somehow at some point get into DJing. But it was mainly because I thought also the DJ was responsible for creating all the music. Of course, later on down the line, I realized the DJ wasn't making all the music, but in my heart, I still had it in that kind of framework that DJ and beat production go hand in hand. No disrespect to producers or DJs, but some people can DJ and can't produce. Some people can produce, can't DJ. They aren't married. But I did end up going into both. But in between finally getting to that point, I don't want to jump ahead. Eventually, maybe that's why I got into rhythm section. But come 8th grade, that's when I got into drums. Joined the school band. This is when I was living in Fairfax, Virginia. Another hella racist spot. And that was sort of my outlet. That was like the one class where I kind of was able to excel beyond all the crap that I was dealing with at that school.
And do you remember who the band teacher was or instructor?
Nah, you couldn't ask. You couldn't tell. You couldn't pay me to bring up any names of any of my teachers. I know there's people like, and if it wasn't for Mr. Hammerschmidt, I would have never. I can't tell you the name of one teacher I had in school ever.
So does that mean that your love of the rhythm section and drums was 100% self-motivated? There was nobody in your life that was encouraging you?
Nobody encouraged me to do it. Like most things I do, I just say, this is something I would really like to do, and I jump into it. Or I say, this is a necessity for me to learn in order to get to where the destination I need to be, and I learn it. At that point, it was on my mother. As with all children, you have to have at least one supportive family member and a parent. And my mother was always 100% behind whatever I want to do. I want to take art classes. She got me. I could draw something really bad, and she's going to put it on the fridge and support me. My mother's amazing. And so she immediately enrolled me. I joined the band, became part of the band, not having any knowledge. She put me in classes where I'm just doing snare drum stuff, like kind of drill stuff with the pad. I'm not learning kit, just snare to be that one piece of the band. And went from having zero knowledge to being basically one of the best in the group, and being able to actually march and do all of that. From there, I ended up moving back to St. Louis with my father in high school, and that's when I was able to convince him to allow me to have a drum kit in the basement.
I'm curious because I keep jumping you through time, but I wonder, how do you think, being the new kid in the city and all these different schools, how do you think that impacted you in terms of connecting with people? You talk about the towns being racist, but does that mean that there weren't bright spots in those places where you felt connected to other young people or programs?
Excuse me, I'm trying to make sure this thing keeps slipping. But I mean, New York for one was diverse. You know, I had friends that were Black, Puerto Rican, Filipino, and Indian. It was amazing in New York. If I could have stayed in New York, I would have loved it. But my mother got a job, and her job, which was located in Manhattan, moved their main offices to Fairfax. So we moved to Fairfax. And then I had such an awful experience in Fairfax that I actually opted to go back to St. Louis, which had its own level of problems. Difference being, though, my father, after the divorce, moved to a different house, which happened to be still in technically the same neighborhood, but it was the first house over the border, which put it in University City rather than Clayton. So now I went from an all-white district to a basically like 98% Black district, which made all the difference in the world. So as messed up as St. Louis is, going to high school at a Black school, of course, the first year being, I don't know if y'all watch Mixed-ish, but I love that show because it's the first time I've ever seen like that representation of, you know, the fact that it takes place in the 80s, being like a kid in elementary school that's mixed. There were like no mixed kids in the 80s and early 90s. So me going to being the new kid at a Black school, being as light as I am, also speaking proper English, man, I got into so many fights my freshman year. But I tell you, the adversity I faced at a Black school versus the adversity I faced at white schools, I'll take that any day. Any day. It was almost like a hazing versus hate crimes. Big difference, you know what I'm saying? So I had pleasant experiences there. It's just New York, pleasant experience. Toronto, amazing experiences, because I actually went back to Toronto in the 6th grade as being a little bit older, and same thing, new school, but it was all love. It was a mixed group of people, mostly white, but everybody got along. It was different culture. But like Fairfax, St. Louis, no.
I'm curious. So can you tell us a little bit more about, not necessarily the adversity or getting into fights, but what do you feel like transitioning from a majority white school to majority Black school in St. Louis? What is that different experience that you had that you feel like was different, in that it was about bringing you into a community as opposed to rejecting you?
I think it was the big difference. Like I said, it felt more like hazing. It was like, if you can deal with this and get past this crap we're giving you, you're in. You know, and it was all love. And I'm sure there were people that were like one of the few white kids that went to school there that might have a different story. Because, you know, if you were like in the AP classes versus the remedial, you know, that was a level of crap that you got from all the other kids. If you were not Black, that was a level of crap you had to take and endure from other kids. And you put it together, it's a whole different thing. And it just so happened most of the white and Asian kids, the only ones were typically in the AP classes. But in my situation, it took one massive fight that the whole school learned about, and everybody was like, he's cool. He can throw down and he can handle his own. And after that, like getting back to the creative side, this is only a few years after New York. So it's like that love of hip hop was able to flourish, you know, and get me steps closer to maybe that possibility of DJing and making beats.
So the rhythm, just so I'm clear, the rhythm section experience, that was middle school, or was that in high school?
I was playing drums in high school. But it was just like on my own. And then I had some friends that were musicians, and we jam. I did take some classes, and then senior year, I was in jazz band. And that allowed me to continue exploring that. But by the time I got to jazz band, I actually switched to bass. So I wasn't playing drums in the jazz band. I switched to bass and took the advantage of the situation to kind of explore something new.
So it sounds like by the end of high school, you've played 4 instruments: the recorder, the saxophone, the drums, and the bass.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when do you actually start to really get into hip hop in terms of, yeah. So when do you really start to get into hip hop? And yeah.
Something in senior year made me feel like I wanted to get into the industry side as well. And I hadn't yet started DJing. I was making pause tapes since sophomore year. That was when I was like making tapes for myself, and then sometimes friends would want copies and I'd make copies for them. So that was my first kind of foray into DJing. Same as I could say I share that with Davey D from the interview y'all did earlier this week. And pause tapes was the beginning for a lot of people, pre-technology of having all these controllers and MP3s, and you just record off of the radio. Your favorite song comes on and you unpause it, record it, and then press pause and wait for your next favorite song. And or you take a CD or a dual tape, and then piece songs together. But it wasn't until senior year, late senior year, that I convinced my father to take me to a hi-fi store and bought this really crappy DJ turntable. It wasn't really a DJ turntable, but it was the closest thing I was going to get at the time. And then immediately went to the local vinyl shop and started buying 12 inches. And so by the time I got to University of Maryland, I had my 1 crate or half a crate of records to get started with.
Hey, Dom, out of curiosity, because I at least know one thing that you haven't talked a bunch about. You mentioned the fact that you have a brother. Where is your brother doing all this? And what's he doing? Like, is he an influence at any point in any of this creativity?
Absolutely. We're getting to a really crucial point where my brother was important, because he was the one that bought me my first sampler. And this was freshman year in college. So apart from just being the older brother that has actual music in a collection already, because when you're the younger person, you're just kind of dipping into your parents' collection or your siblings' collection. So my brother was into everything from like punk. He introduced me to, like Black Flag and groups like that. One of my all-time favorite groups, Fishbone, which is like this 80s, 90s alternative ska and rock band that doesn't get their due to this day, but they're still around. And the fact that they were a Black rock band was like insane to me and extremely influential. But then also he was the one that introduced me to Run DMC, LL Cool J, and Public Enemy. And the minute I heard PE, that was just a very transformative moment. So, and stuff like that continued throughout my adolescence. He would just send me tapes for Christmas or something. He'd send me like a cassette of Cocteau Twins, which are an 80s and 90s post-punk group I had never heard of, and it just blew my mind. And to this day, I just love him to death. And he's just notorious for having done that my whole life, despite not really living together. He stayed with my father, I was with my mother, and then he went to UCLA, and I was still, around in St. Louis at that time. Then later, he came to stay with me and my mother in Maryland for like a year almost, and saw what I wanted to do and believed in me. And my boy, Mr. Elite from the Soul Controllers, was selling his EPS and Sonic EPS. And my brother was like, I got you. And he got it. I gave him my drum kit to hold as a result. And he bought me the sampler. And that's what got me started.
Okay, so you're bringing up the Soul Controllers. And for those of you that were listening on Monday or watching on Monday, we interviewed Bushhead Ed, who's one of the members of a collective, the Controllers that began at the University of Maryland. I know my Wi-Fi is special.
Little bit.
But I was going to say, so what was did you have a connection to WMUC when you were at College Park?
Did I? All right. So uh, WMUC is the University of Maryland radio station. Every Friday night, they had the hip hop show called Soul Controllers. And anybody on campus that was a diehard head at the time, and keep in mind, there wasn't a huge black population. Although my freshman year was the highest black enrollment they had ever had at the school, partially because the basketball team had done so well the previous year, it put them on the map. And as a result, they had a huge explosion in enrollment. But for a lot of us, there weren't a lot of places to go on campus. And one place we did find to kind of gather was those shows. So that's where I met a lot of friends I still have to this day. And most importantly, is where kind of the foundation for my first rap group, Empire, which consisted of maybe three. See, I knew this was going to happen. My mic came off. I'm going to hold it. So about three people from UMCP, and we went on to like perform at the Apollo and a few other things before breaking up. But that was the catalyst for everything, because that's when I started really getting high gear into producing. That's when I started taking on more of like the admin side of things and understanding marketing and promotion and branding. But it all starts at Soul Controllers.
So does what was it called? Black Stallion
Black
Promotion?
with Trevor.
Like,
So that's another crucial moment. So one day, my boy Trevor, who's a frat brother with Mozzie, says he needs help promoting a party he's going to do in the Colony Ballroom on campus. And he's doing this in conjunction with another brother named T, who had Opal Productions. And T was like, hey, I'm looking to start doing stuff in DC at actual clubs. You want to do that? And it was like, cool. So that started me on the road of promoting nightclubs at the age of like 19, when I was still underage. But I was in doing like the Ritz and Quigley's and all the big hip hop spots in DC at the time. And that's when I started connecting with all the WKYS DJs, started being able to open, not just because I was promoting the night, but because I built up enough trust with like Quicksilver from KYS and built a friendship with DJ Six Sense, who was also my age. And we were the two underage guys there. That allowed me to start opening and getting free records and getting my skills together. But it really wasn't until 2000 that I really said, I'm going to do DJing for real, not just house parties and open up for people when I can, or play for touring with my boys that I was producing. Because at the time I really got into the business side, and that led into working with record labels, and then also producing my boys. We would tour, and I would be the tour DJ, but I hadn't really dedicated myself to clubs. And 2000 is when that happened.
Just to be clear, because I was thinking this while you were talking. When you're talking about opening, you're talking about opening as a DJ, or were you is there an MC part of your story?
I did, in Empire. Yeah, I would write, and I was on like one song, and anytime we went to freestyle sessions, if it was like a loud club and I was in the moment, I would hop on the mic. I had been known to, but I would never, ever call myself an MC.
So
I dabbled.
So
some people dabbled in drugs in college. I dabbled in MCing.
So at what point do you get involved with the Midnight Forum? Because you said, yeah.
All right. That had nothing to do with me being a DJ or a producer. There was a point like I said, I was working, promoting clubs. Then our friend DJ RBI said around 98 or so, was like, you need to meet this guy, the Great Deity Da, who was one of the only rappers in DC at the time who was actually pressing his stuff up and promoting it on the scale of what you would expect from an independent label. He was going above and beyond compared to a lot of people. No disrespect to a lot of other people who I happen to love from that era, but there was only really very few people who were going beyond DC. You know, most people were just making stuff and selling it around the hood or at Tower Records at best. We started producing and promoting records together, and then that took me around the country as his DJ, which got me connected with record labels because they're like, I see you everywhere. I need you working for me. So then around 2000, I get a call from Shayna Lim, who is now also part of the Words, Beats, and Life family. And she's like, I've been talking to this guy, Daniel Barry, who's starting a nonprofit that uses hip hop to teach entrepreneurship. And we're building a committee, and he wants to have a meeting with as many like DC creatives and industry people as possible. And I was looked at more from an organizational standpoint than a creative standpoint, because there were other people there that were dancers, like specifically DJs, specifically MCs. And I was there sort of as this member of the community that had more of a business acumen. But that's how that started. And then I have to blame Daryl Perry from the Poe MCs for actually elevating me to more of a substantial role, because initially we were just there as advisors to help Daniel get together and start developing a curriculum. Because again, there was no such thing as hip hop nonprofits at the time. Now they're all over the place. Words, Beats, and Life does it the best. But at the time, especially, there were maybe rec centers you could go to and rap. Maybe you could go record somewhere, but there was no place trying to teach based on a curriculum, especially. So, but eventually we got our paperwork all done, and there needed to be a board of directors. And Daryl Perry was the one that was like, Dom should be the executive, or should be the head of the board, because Daniel, who created it, was the executive director. And later on, Daryl was like, man, you reeked of responsibility. That's why I did it, because he felt like more than anybody, I would actually be more qualified to be on an organizational side. So it actually had zero to do with my creativity.
So how did your creativity continue, since you weren't running the organization at that point? You're on the executive board, so you're still grinding as a musician. What's happening in your life at that point?
So I'm working with some guys from College Park, a brother named Damien, who went by Interstellar, a guy who's known as the College Park Tupac, Lee Majors, and my boy Hassani Latif Chapman. And we're just doing gigs anywhere we can get them, traveling to the Midwest, down south, putting out independent stuff. And it's amazing because a lot of that stuff is I'm seeing on Reddit, like conversations, and on YouTube and all it's amazing who's finding all this music and actually really enjoying it and trying to find, and the price on the vinyl, because it's so rare, has gone up high. Like I was at the store the other day, a couple months ago, actually, in LA, called Cosmic Records, and I browsed the hip hop section, and they had one of our records in there, and it was in horrible condition, but still more expensive than all the mainstream stuff that I would consider classics. So it's wild, but that's what I was doing at the time. On top of, like I said, 2000 was sort of when I said, you know what, I'm going to take DJing more seriously. And I hollered at 6 Cents, and he was like, come on board as my opening DJ at Platinum. Platinum was one of the biggest clubs in DC at the time. It was brand new. Sunday was the urban night of the whole week for all of the city. All the Redskins were there, the Wizards, everybody, DC Capital, or not Capitals, but the soccer team, you name it, celebrities, capacities like 1,000 people, amazing. And it was owned by a guy who was one of the top club owners in the city at the time. And so that helped me get in to have like a longer career in the club scene. And yeah, it was basically it. So I'm doing the club stuff. I'm also developing I'm working as an intern for Elektra. Well, actually not. I went to go work for Elektra, but because I wasn't in college, they wouldn't allow me. So I was working for a lot of indie labels at the time, which then eventually became Elektra as a paid marketing guy for DC and Baltimore. But that's later on.
We'll talk about it. So getting into the clubs as a DJ then continues to open up music industry doors for you. What happens?
I actually got discouraged with DJing again. The guy who owned Platinum was kind of a thief on levels, and he was notorious for screwing people over. And I ain't that guy. Problem is, I'm being used on levels because of my level of talent and my ability to play virtually any genre and having the actual crates to do it. So there were a lot of people that could play hip hop, but not necessarily dancehall. I could go do the reggae room by myself. I could come on Top 40 night. I could come on dance night. I could do all of that. And so I was being used to kind of test things out. And I didn't work at the radio station like all the other headliners. So, and I never had any intention of being on WKYS or WPGC. I knew the politics of it. I had no desire to be in that position. But that also meant that I was going to be second tier to any of my friends that were working for the radio stations. So it boosts not just your paycheck, but it boosts your notoriety and puts you in a different league. But again, I didn't feel like that was for me. I didn't want to play the same commercial songs over and over and over and over again. I'll do it at the club, but I'm not going to just go on every night for like $20 a set doing that. I'm rambling.
I was going to ask, because I'm literally learning the story as we talk. So at what point how much later does the founding of Decipher at PFW happen?
All right. So what ended up happening with working the hip hop clubs was I decided never to work for that owner again, which then cut out 50% of the clubs. And I had already determined I was never going to work for the other guy who owned the other 50%. So there was a year around 2004 where I just didn't DJ at all. But I was at home doing what would ultimately be termed as open format, which didn't exist prior to then. Just experimenting, which then got me in the door at Steve's Bar Room later on, which then took me to a whole different level. But I won't get into that now. But around that time, when the whole open format scene came out, and I became one of the main people in that set, moving from the urban clubs to DuPont Circle, working more for like a white audience, playing a wide variety of things. I get a call from a guy named Mazi Mutafa who says that there's this radio station that's going to start doing a hip hop strip. And he had this idea for bringing 3 people from hip hop nonprofits together to discuss current events and local things and play hip hop. And that's when the whole Decipher thing happened, thanks to you. So that's what was going on. And also at that time, I had become really well established within being one of the primary go-tos as a street retail and college and club marketing rep for major labels. So I was working for Virgin Records, Elektra. I was working for movie companies like Columbia, taking on like Rockstar Games, AT&T. I always have too many hustles going on. So I had like DuPont City Circle clubs, nonprofit at the Midnight Forum. I'm doing work for the record labels and media companies, and then get called in to do these radio shows.
And then it's not too long after that you get a call from Councilmember Graham's office about the idea of taking what you're doing with young people around graffiti to create a new initiative, right?
Correct. So I know a lot of people are like, this is too much stuff. So by this time, we're about 5-6 years in on the Midnight Forum. I've been the board chair but also the primary person in terms of curriculum development, enrollment, running classes. If anybody's worked for a nonprofit, you know how it goes. You're wearing a lot of hats. And Daniel, the founder, who was executive director, decided to leave due to an illness. He's doing fine now, but at the time it was best for him to leave. And that put everything on my shoulders. And I opted to break from the board to become executive director at his behest, filled my position on the board. And we got an office down by Howard off of S Street in Georgia, or in 7th, and started working out of a church there. Shout out to New Community. And yeah, we started doing more and more murals at that time, which caught the attention of Graham, Councilmember Graham, rest in peace, whose office called me, and I thought they were trying to get me to snitch on folks. They're like, "We heard you do graffiti work." I'm like, "Yeah." Who do you work with? Why do you want to know? Do you know of a person named Mo? What are you trying to get at? And I was really suspicious. Like, these dudes are trying to, on some FBI COINTELPRO, trying to get me to snitch on my community. I was like, look, if you're trying to get me to like rat some people out and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, no. That's not it. We actually want to try to do something that helps your community by helping solve our problems. So that we came up with a program called Murals DC that was a tagging abatement program where we took defaced property that had been tagged on and used students and established graffiti artists during the summer to paint murals with input from the community. And this, I believe, is still going on, but I ran it with help from other organizations like Words, Beats, and Life for 3 years. When I moved to LA, Words, Beats, and Life became the managers, and as I think you told me now, it's 100% under the banner of DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You still there, man?
Yeah.
I need some water. I'm talking too much.
So the answer to your question is it's actually still a partnership between the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities and the Department of Public Works. They haven't stayed true to the mission of engaging young people. They just pay artists to come in and paint murals.
I'm curious though, are they still at least staying true to the idea of using more contemporary, urban styles of art? Because the biggest hurdle we had to leap in establishing the program was first year, we had a lot of adversity from the commission saying they weren't comfortable with doing graffiti. I'm like, why are we doing this if it's not 100% graffiti? And thanks to a few people that they respected that they made be part of our advisory board that fought on our behalf, saying, I don't even want to be a part of this if it's not a graffiti program. Only reason I'm here is because you said it was going to be a graffiti program, but you're trying to put in all these traditional artists that your commission's been giving grants to without any type of, really vetting for decades. That they're tired, they're old, they're played out. Time for the new blood. And we did a lot to make sure that became the mission, that we brought in new blood, new urban-based artists that have a foot inside hip-hop culture, that even if they don't do graffiti and aren't traditionally aerosol, there are people like Aniakon that could come in who has a hip-hop background, but hadn't yet, and was working with acrylics, but hadn't yet really had the opportunity to work with aerosol. And I was hoping that would still be the case, but apparently not. But at least for many, many years, that was the case.
So
we
now
won that battle, at least temporarily.
Agreed. So now we're at the point where you transition to move to LA to pursue a different set of dreams. Can you talk to me a little bit? We're in our last 10 minutes, and it's crazy. We're almost caught up to the present. You told me a whole life story in 1 hour. So let's talk about.
Y'all still out there? Anybody watching?
Yeah. in the comments I've been sharing?
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. What's the question?
Did you hear that?
Nope.
No, I said
There we
people
go.
have been posting comments. I've been sharing them. So yeah, there's people watching. So
Nice.
you moved to LA. What took you to LA?
Shout out to Jasmine if she's watching. Bands. Anybody else? So I moved to LA. Yes.
Tell me what made you move to LA? Because you've already talked about moving your whole life. So what made you decide to chase another dream out in Los Angeles?
I felt like there was nothing left for me to do in DC. I was like, if I'm going to do entertainment, this ain't the spot. It's just not the place to be. It's like, I got to be in New York or I got to be in LA. And as you can tell, I had a lot I was juggling and I needed a reason to stop doing so much. I was like, this one thing will never work if I'm constantly running a nonprofit, doing radio, running a blog. That's another thing we didn't talk about. The whole hipster overkill section of my life at the end of my term in DC.
Let's go back. Let's go back to Steve's Barroom and hipster overkill.
So around the late 2000s, I just decided to that I actually left Decipher at WPFW because I was uninspired by hip hop in the 2000s. It just wasn't doing anything for me. I had a hard time finding new music every week that I was excited about, and I didn't want to fall into complacency playing the same old De La Soul and Pete Rock and Gangstar tracks every week. I was like, if I can't be inspired by what's new, then I need to find something else. That happened to be the budding sort of like all the indie dance music that was coming out through warehouses. So it was this weird crossroads, everything from MIA to A-Track and Diplo in the Fool's Gold and Mad Decent things starting to bubble to some European DJs like Fetty Legrand and Eric Prydz that were having some success breaking through with dance records in the United States, which was not a thing that was accepted on commercial radio at the time, which is hard to believe. So me and a brother named Demetrius George decided to be like, look, we're never going to get ahead unless we start a promotion company and make our own brand. And that ended up being Hipster Overkill. And I brought my homie Sean, MC Sean Lucas in, and he was, sort of the gasoline that really got us going and accepted in DC. But that opened up all these doorways in the dance community because we had this blog and we were one of the first people in that movement profiling dance music. And dance music's always been the ugly stepchild of the music industry. And you could be a house fan and not really know much or anything about your favorite DJ and producer, let alone what they look like sometimes. So we were actually producing MTV kind of quality profiles, video profiles on the A-list people or all the up and coming people who never get respect from MTV and Rolling Stone. And we had the doors flung open for us. And that essentially was the catalyst because I now had all these contacts in LA with Steve Aoki's Dim Mak and all these people to be able to come here and have sort of an in already. I had contacts, but it's all because of Hipster Overkill. And at that time, it was right when suddenly dance music started like propelling. So I was lucky enough to be part of the hip hop scene before it was profitable and ride that. And then suddenly get in on this new wave and be part of something that suddenly became like dominating worldwide. This is pre Electric Daisy Carnival, like being like the #1 festival in the United States, and EDM being even a term people knew.
Cool. So you use those relationships, or those relationships are part of what draw you out to LA to do what?
Yeah. I mean, I was like, look, I need to stop doing 10 things. I need to do, if I'm going to do DJing and music, I got to focus on DJing and music, and DC is not a place where you're going to succeed beyond a certain level. If I want to make more than like $500, if I want to make $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, $100,000, got to go to LA. Didn't get to that level, but I'm doing well. But it's still way more opportunity here. And the way that industry people started looking at me that I've known for years, suddenly people that I'm like friends with started looking at me in a completely different light simply by relocating to a city that deemed me as being someone that was serious about my craft and my desire to do this. And you're frozen. Boogity-boo. All
No,
right.
I'm here.
So
I'm here.
I came out here and I was able to use those connections. Again, it was doing my own blog was my in by creating this platform for other artists and a brand. I was able to get just everybody from PR, like all your favorite DJs and producers, all their management and press people wanted us on their side. And so I didn't get into EDM through just diehard DJing. Like, I'm gonna just beat this door down as one thing. It was actually the side door that I went through that got me in to be able to even be an LA-based DJ.
And so because we're down to the last 4 minutes. Talk to me about what you're doing now in this moment. I know you've been doing graphic arts work this whole time, which you didn't mention. You're on the Pacifica station in Los Angeles, doing some work there, and you're also doing these live streams, working to grow a virtual audience in what's really a tough environment. But were you doing that before?
So hard. I was not.
Okay, so let's talk about where you are right now.
What was live streaming? That was for video games. You know, I'm like most DJs. This is a new thing I had to just develop. I just happened to be I already had this background in video editing and graphic design. And so when I started learning all this back end to broadcasting, it helped me create something visually that stood out. And it's hard to explain it here, but I get a lot of credit for my virtual stages and my environments that I create, compared to what a lot of other people are doing. And that, again, helped me do things like doing graphic design. I get more graphic clients as a result because I had to start doing more of that to make ends meet during COVID. There's no nightclubs. So graphic design became a method of staying afloat. But I get a lot of that work, and I get to do birthday parties on Zoom, and I'm still lucky enough to get paid to DJ during quarantine simply because I had this ability to create something visually attention grabbing. But it's a skill set that I had zero knowledge of in April. I had to develop this basically like June, I think I started getting into it. And then July was when I really like started streaming, and then it's evolved. I keep upping it every time. But yeah, the whole virtual game is very, very strange, very weird. Luckily, I also do radio. I'm on Dash Radio, which is the world's #1 commercial-free internet radio station. There's a lot of people on there, from like Snoop Dogg has his own station, for instance. I do a show on the Delicious Vinyl station, which is full circle because the first label to pay me as a marketing rep was Delicious Vinyl. So I do a show every Monday or every Tuesday called Fade, which is my promotion company in LA that focuses on, we started sort of as a global base promotion company to do parties that cater to everybody from the Caribbean community to the Latin community to anybody, any ages, didn't matter, sexuality. And now it's become this whole thing with the radio show. We playing bass music from Brazil to Africa to the Caribbean. It's phenomenal. I love it. And then that got me into doing Pacifica Radio again, which is out here. It's KPFK as opposed to WPFW that was in DC.
I gotta say, this is really changing. You're the first person I've said to in this series. I wish I had another hour actually, just to talk to you about from Hipster Overkill to now, because it feels like we're missing a lot because I don't know the questions to ask. But I want to thank you for spending this hour with me. I've learned a ton about you. I wonder if you could give advice to that younger Dominic, maybe that's in one of those racist cities. What would you say? What would you say to him about just some words of encouragement, or something that's going to guide him.
What's funny is I haven't made all the right steps, but I didn't care that much about what people thought, and that was what I just knew I had a passion for it, and I was going to do it. There's not a lot I could tell younger me because I had goals and I did it. Whether it was like a complete success or not is another thing, but I don't fault any of those decisions that I made. Because there's a whole nother trajectory I could have gone on. I was offered a job by Arista Records to be the head, be the assistant to the head of the Mid-Atlantic office. That could have been a whole different Dominic in 2020. I could be in an office running a department right now. So only thing I would really say is really don't buck the system so much, really take into consideration the opportunities that can come for working for other people. I love working for myself, so I wouldn't change that. But at the same time, I often think, I'm like, what if I had taken that job? That could have been such a completely different future for me. But I was doing really well for myself at the time. So I was like, nope, sticking with myself, just going with me.
No doubt. Well, I definitely want to thank you for spending this hour with me, sharing some of your story, especially for those of us who know you but might not know these details. I definitely feel like I could be a better friend because I actually know more about you. And I really appreciate you for sharing the journey, because I feel like even in this hour, I'm inspired to continue to chase dreams and to make things that I know are valuable. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. I want to thank.
Actually, I know what I would tell younger me. Keep playing saxophone.
We're in quarantine. Let's get you a saxophone.
All right, let's do it. I'm gonna start the GoFundMe when we hang up.
No doubt. And so, for people who want to watch you on live stream, where can they find you?
All my links are at djdpainter.com. My name's Dominic Painter. I go by D Painter. A lot of people think it's DJ Painter. No, DJ D Painter. And I have a new single out called I Ain't Got. You can check that out on Spotify, Tidal, Apple, YouTube, everywhere. But you can get the link by going to DJ D Painter and find me at DJ D Painter on Instagram.
Dope. Thanks so much, Dominic. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it. It's actually archived on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page. And we're going to go ahead and close out. This is all part of the Alternative Winter Break Media Arts Edition. We've got more interviews next week. But for now, why don't I share a couple of commercials for the Academy? And maybe if you know a young person who's interested in pursuing a career similar to what Dominic described, and they live in the DMV area, maybe they can enroll.
Let's take you on a time jump, virtual Zoom, bringing it back to Theodore's bedroom. These hands are passionately polysyllabic, putting the Jeopardy theme on swings. 10 dons giving predictions, balancing vibes like the sons and daughters of Ipwan. Ear to the underground, flicking off. Peppermint, fresh experiment, let's go. El Premier Elemento, you gotta take your time, press your fingers to the line. Red man, focus your mind. And once you do that, you're at the front of the combine. To the SP1200, the blue light bulb. To the board, the engineer's hands, and the limited well of patience. Hallelujah to everybody say ho. Amen to all the ladies say ow. Thank God for make money, money, make money, money. And bless every hand that was ever put in the air. In your name, we pray. Amen to that dream, that early morning conversation, the argument that birthed the idea, that unbelievable situation, the story that had to be told somehow.